Those of you who are on campus but maybe not in a comfortable place, the classroom is available, 401 in building 15. I was over there before, and there was a few folks already settling in there. From period 4, I will go down there and we can meet face to face and continue the conversation for those of you who want to. And I've already got that kind of set up there, logged in to the internet and whatnot, and we can look a little bit more at some of the videos and whatnot that are linked on the website. So we'll just wait a couple more minutes because there are still so many people piling in. So I'll turn my camera off just for a second, organize a couple of things here. I just had a message from one student, the ubiquitous search for power. Okay, unfortunately, building 15 being very old, they've spent a fair bit of money a few years back reinforcing it in case there's an earthquake. So there's a much diminished chance that you'll die if a major earthquake comes. And brand new air conditioning there, which has made a very big difference. I was just down there checking that out. Used to be kind of unpleasant, and they've retrofitted elevators and a whole bunch of things. The one thing that is pretty much impossible to do with those old buildings is to put power through to the desks because they're all poured concrete floors and classic concrete modernist structures, and so there are just no conduits under the floor to power them, I'm afraid. Not sure if it's in this class or in the introduction to business, but one suggestion I made was everybody get yourself a big external power pack, particularly if your computer uses USB-C, which is really good because you can then you can power everything off it. Your iPhone, all the rest of it. Most computers will happily draw a charge these days from USB-A dribbles out USB-C, so you're not just beholden to the power plug. Okay, so have a go there. Okay, rightio, lots of things I'd like to cover. We're up at 87. So I think 88 and climbing. Okay, let's do what we did last week. Let's just put 2 in attendance, and I'll show you what I mean. I'll do that to everyone myself so that you'll get that. Okay. And just bear with me. One note to myself here, just for later on down in period 4 in the classroom. Okay, so today we're first of all going to talk about some examples of communications fail. These are completely random. These are just things that I've come across here and there. 1 or 2 are picked up from social media shares, but the bulk of them I've just simply found being out and about. There is an endless process of discovering mediocre communications. I noticed just before when I was down in the SILS office, but I didn't have my phone with me to tap to snap a photo, is that clearly they held a meeting in one room, and you have to go through some doors down a hallway. And for people attending the meeting, they had stuck a sign on the intermediate doors with a big sign to the bathrooms and an arrow straight ahead. But then when the meeting finished, they forgot to take the sign down. And so they opened the door, and the net effect is that a whole bunch of other visitors were walking in entirely the wrong direction, looking for the bathrooms because the sign was still stuck there, but with the door open, it was pointing in the opposite direction. So just those really kind of elementary things, which kind of make sense until they don't make sense because some, we say parameter, some basis of the planning has changed. I think what we'll see particularly in Japan is communications never having been taken very seriously professionally. There seems to have been, unlike in engineering, for example, where the engineers are very rigorous, great attention to detail, and in the very shokunin-san monozukuri kind of tradition, a tradition of making things and taking pride in the artisanal tradition, lots of attention to detail. Whereas a lot of the corporate communication seems to have just fallen to the people who are just assumed to be the least incapable of it. Maybe they were kind of bunke. Maybe when they applied to the company 20 years before, they were a graduate. They'd said they were a graduate of Ebungaku, so they were suddenly asked to do the English language translation, for example. And so many companies just haven't really taken the communication function seriously, unless they're spending huge amounts of money asking Dentsu or Hakuhodo to do it. So communications is this once-off outsourced thing, or alternatively just kind of done in-house, very often by the people who were not core employees, didn't have a particular stake in it. They just, and their contract was up, or they were going to do in the past, as was so often the case, particularly women, young women hired, the kotobuki taisha, kind of retiring from the company when you got married and other things. Your mum and dad's generation was to some degree this. Of course, the working environment has changed enormously, but professional culture hasn't necessarily caught up, at least in relation to communications. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into some screen share and throw some fail examples at you. I haven't put these up as PDFs yet. I will do, but I'll delete a couple because of copyright issues. And the slides that are up there were the ones, of course, that I've fully created myself. There's a broad overview of communications fail, and the more positive examples, and particularly the introduction to communications with the discussion of the charge of the Light Brigade, that very famous example. I've narrated some slides there that's, takes the form of a effective, well, it's a video file, but it's talking slide presentation that's on YouTube and linked to through the site. So have a look at that there. Okay. Again, I'm using the Keynote, the PDF rather than Keynote, just because it makes me a little bit nervous that there might be some issue there. Okay, so bear with me just a moment. Actually, I need to sort something here. I've mistakenly opened the Keynote again, not the PDF. Okay, bear with me just a moment. I'll close a couple other things down here. My system is groaning under the weight. Yeah, sorry, just a second. Keynote is taken over and I want to close it. I'll have to close it down. It's kind of got stuck because it wants to be used and it won't be used. Kill it off. Okay, now it's working. Okay, well, let's talk about fails. And some of the fails are just really just bad luck. Companies don't really have much control. You get just this bad kind of confluence of events, which leaves their brand in a very awkward kind of place. One of the really sad ones was, of course, a crash of Asiana Airlines, failed takeoff effectively, which caught fire. This is always a problem when you put your brand very spectacularly on the product, and then something goes really wrong. Okay, and there are a whole bunch of photos that you can find of several crashes, unfortunately, where planes have, for example, burnt out on the tarmac. There's a particularly striking set of images where you can find where an Asiana plane is seen to be taking off in front of another Asiana plane, and all these, smart comments that people have written, passengers, please look out the right side rather than the left side, because of the sheer awkwardness. Okay, and now let me just have a look at chat. Some people are sending me messages. Okay, just people putting attendance. Right. Okay. What's kind of more interesting from the point of view of communication design is just the sheer lazy fails you get. And then we also get the interesting effect of curious alternative readings. One of our biggest problems in communications at a personal level, of course, at an organizational level, is the people doing the communicating understand exactly what they want to say. They understand what their intentions are, but they lack the recipient perspective. And we talk about communications theory. This is very, rigorously theorized. And so this is why we really need to kind of market test a lot of our messages, to put them to focus groups, to put them to target audience, for example, and to just see if people have an alternative take on them. A significant reason why more diverse and organizationally flat companies do better at this is you're just simply going to have more voices with more cultural backgrounds, more likely to question whether a particular message is appropriate. Okay, now, excuse me, just adjust my camera, although I'm just a tiny talking head. A really funny thing, actually, I picked up this one myself. This is over at just near Waseda's Nishi Waseda campus. And Adam Johns, who we'll be collaborating with later on in the semester, he picked up exactly the same thing down in Kyoto when he was still working for Doshisha, and he shared this with me. And I said, oh, that's funny. I was just going to share this with you. Okay. So special warning, you just got lazy, throw some English up. And of course, any English speaker looks at that and just goes, special warning about what? Okay. Even in Japanese, it's a little bit vague, and that's exactly how the police want it. This is a broad kind of, we're keeping a lookout for security risks. You're going to see a hell of a lot of these signs, I suspect, because I probably haven't updated them, being pulled out again in the run-up to the Olympics, assuming that's going to happen, as people seem to be pretty committed to doing these days. Now, of course, there's just lots of cute lazy fails and endless collection of them. If you find some interesting ones, please share them on the forum site we have there on Moodle. Okay, this one is at Tokyo Tower, actually. So this isn't good to drink. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But maybe better than nothing. The point is it's actually recycled water, so you don't really want to drink it. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things we see is outsourcing of English, or asking staff members to do English translation. And there's an interesting lesson here if you're going to be doing this yourself. Be very careful of presenting alternatives within the text when you're giving it to people. Because a lot of lazy people will just do copy paste, and if their English is really bad, they just simply won't even realize that they're copying mistakes across. What is an incredible shortage in Japan now is anybody who's got pretty good English who can do web design. Generally, people who self-select into digital design, content design, say videography, and particularly web design and whatnot, they tend to be very They tend to go to either the typical art universities or Digital Hollywood University, for example. And generally their English isn't so strong. And so one of the problems for companies is that you can hand over the content. You know, the designers make a beautiful website, but they also have to propagate it with content. And so they often hand over the content and it gets cut in the wrong place. People don't realize that they're doing it because they don't have the English savvy. This, of course, means that sites should always be prototyped. They should be meticulously checked, ideally by native speakers, to scan them. And actually, some of the most expensive providers of, for example, web design and whatnot, other interface design, particularly stuff that gets outsourced to Dentsu and then thrown to Stahlke, to a remarkable degree, they often don't do basic checks. And given the prices that they're charging, there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't have SILS students with very good English, you know, paid 9 sen in an hour, which is much more than usual bite rate, but an absolute bargain to those kind of companies to be checking on things. I kind of, first of all, there's the obvious break here, but, you know, I like the smoking on the tracks. And I just saw that this is on Chikatetsu, this is just on the on Tozai-sen, you know. I just had this image that, you know, the train stopped because there's some dude just on the tracks, just, you know, having a cigarette, as we'd say in Australia, having a durry, yeah, just finishing up, and then puts his cigarette, moves out of the way, and then the train starts off again. Okay, more. I don't think that's what they meant. This is a classic example of probably a native speaker was asked to check a draft and has been really polite, respectful, presented an alternative very tactfully, and both of them ended up. So if we look at the Japanese at the top, you can see, okay, and then straightforward, and it says the train dwell time is being extended due to adjustment in operations. Now that's definitely someone in the company had a bit of a go at translating it, maybe went on to Google Translate, although I think even Google would be horrified with that. The train dwell time is being extended due to adjustment in operations. Please wait a moment. Thank you for your patience. And then maybe someone else is saying, maybe another go, probably actually not a native speaker's had a go at this. A different one has tried, so they've put or adjustment in the train intervals is being made. And what's happened? Both versions have ended up there. Neither of them are very good. So we just simply need the native speaker check, okay? Of course, the really lazy ones you do in Japanese, you pretend it's actually in English, and all you do is you just simply convert it to Romaji. My Shogakko Yonnensei son, who is currently on an English strike, he and his mates have enough Romaji to be able to do this one quite confidently. So Shinkansen Kaisatsu. Now, I don't think there's a native English speaker on the planet who hasn't studied Japanese who would know what the hell a kaisatsu is. Okay. And this is one of my very favorites. This is from a former zemisei of mine, currently working in Singapore. And I'm often saying this again to my young son, no poisute, okay? That is like seriously cute. This is just one of those classic Japanese English as ornamentation. It's not really meant as communications. It's just there to make it all look a little bit exotic, okay? By the way, one of those things where you use English as ornamentation, which seems innocuous but understandable to Japanese, can be quite offensive to foreigners, or taken as quite offensive. This widespread no with a big, you know, the big Ghostbusters kind of like butts kind of thing through it, and a big no with whatever you're trying to stop. Because when there's lots of Japanese written and foreigners can't read it, and then they just see the no, which is the much larger part of the message. First of all, capital letters in social media is often referred to as just digital shouting, okay? So you're just yelling at someone as soon as you put something in caps. And when the larger part of the text is in the English, no, it kind of looks like the larger part of the problem are the foreigners. Now, I know many Japanese involved in doing this would say, "Chotto higai mousou janai ka?" And there are a few kind of crazy foreigners who always take everything as prejudice. but for the most part, it is a quite understandable kind of reaction. Hang on, are you signaling us out? Are we the ones who have the wari mana on the chikatetsu, and then they show all the behaviors that they're trying to fix on the chikatetsu posters, for example, and you realize that actually most of those behaviors are quite distinctive Japanese ones. We see cute ones, the Tokyuhans, shirking goods. I just don't know how they got to this one. Shirking is like, I don't know, slacking off, being lazy, avoiding what you should do. Don't know where they got that one from, but add to the collection, okay? This you can see. Okay, if you go to Bikuro, any of you who change trains at Shinjuku Sanchome, you can see this. If you head into Bikuro, the sign is still there, okay? It's been there for a couple of years now, and they haven't got around to changing it, okay? Konosaki Sugu, soon to come. Okay, well, the store's been open for at least 10 years, so come on, guys, you can do a little bit better than that. From one student who is particularly passionate about Cuban music, kind of made the point, this is just the most elementary kind of one. If you're going to use flags, get the right one, okay? Cuban sandwich, but has a Puerto Rican flag. So get your facts right. Now, of course, if you go into the Hyakuyen shop, there's just a trove of cute English, but it's not really English. Again, it's just ornamentation. This English is, well, we see range hood filter, but it says, とっても使いやすく経済的な可愛いから部屋にも合うよ. Okay, well, that's interesting English. The funny thing is it's actually quite an effort to actually write that in Romaji, right? Because you can't just do automatic convert to kind of Romaji. Well, I guess you can put in Romaji, just kind of bang it out. But it's always trying to convert and gives you squiggly lines to say it's wrong. So anyway, they've kind of gone to an effort to make it look like English, but it ain't. But, you know, they're capping each bit. Yeah, that was a bit of an effort they made. And of course, we can find so many examples. I'll just, you know, throw a few up here. Okay, first and foremost, we produce for human beings. To quote the comedian Seinfeld, yeah, it's because dogs don't carry money, okay? So dogs don't buy things. Why dogs don't carry money? Dogs don't have pockets, okay? And if they did have a pocket, getting the money out of their pocket would be kind of difficult because like a dog paw, you know, you just can't pick up the money, okay? So generally you're reliant on your master, the human, to pay for stuff, okay? A few other silly things, okay? Right toilet seat cover, sitting feelings are comfortable. Hey, there we go. The material of the high quality was used, very good. I'll put this in more just to remind myself to invite yourselves to keep an eye out if you're looking at real estate websites, particularly if you're looking at Chuko Bukken. I think Japanese real estate agents individually and collectively have some absolutely the worst taste in the world, absolutely hopeless at presenting real estate in a desirable fashion. So someone from the Fiddle-san kind of walks in, they walk around, maybe they've got a camera, more likely they've got their phone, and then sometimes the pictures are so bad, you're thinking they're probably some Ossans using his garake kind of phone. He walks around and snap, 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 snap. So you've got people's washing in the background. And the one that always fascinates me is the picture of the toilet. The picture of the toilet with the pink toilet seat on full display, seat cover, you know, that the person bought on Hyakin, and it's kind of discolored and it's been there for 80 years or something. And you think, I just can't imagine myself in this property, okay? Rule number one is when you're selling real estate is you actually have to depersonalize it. You have to stop people feeling like they're somehow a home invader, that they are actually intruding on someone else's privacy, okay, in a not kind of nice way. And generally people feel revulsion with the bodily functions of other people, okay? So the last thing you want to do is depict all of those kind of gross things. you know, if you're going to take a picture of the kitchen, you know, you don't have people's grotty sponges and their kind of half-turned brown dishcloth hanging over the tap and all of those kind of things. Adam Johnson and I are actually have quite an evolving collection of incredibly bad real estate fails. So we'll probably make a fun video and share some of them with you, but you can find plenty of these yourselves. Okay. Now, this one is from people who really should know better. And directly as a client who was affected by this, I was dismayed. What is this? Okay. I'll come back to the notes that are up the top. Okay. Room rater, check this out yourselves. Not now, please. Later on. Room rater at Rate My Skype Room. Although most of them are now kind of Zoom or whatever. Hugely influential hashtag. You'll find it on Twitter. And a guy in America started rating the rooms of people who were doing interviews on American television via Skype and later on Zoom and whatnot. And of course, as we moved into lockdown last year, this became ubiquitous. So he brutally puts ratings on people for their poor backdrops and setups for their live crosses. And he gives 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 for what he calls hostage videos, people who look like they've just been pushed up against the wall by Hezbollah to show, yes, they're still alive and pay the ransom or negotiate the swap of prisoners or whatever. A warning on that, the guy is brazenly politically biased. He hates the right wing of the Republican Party of the United States. So he will quite shamelessly say, room 7 out of 10, vicious stance towards migrants, -10 adding up to -3, you know, for your room. Okay, so there's a bit of a political thing. But anyway, I think this was a wonderful example for this. And what is this? This is, I'm going to come back to this example of this company too, this enormous storied company, Sumitomo Mitsui Banking. Okay, although in Japanese you may be confused because it's Mitsui Sumitomo. And several of the major bank groups, the other one Mitsubishi UFJ, provide an example of classic Japanese chutahampa, corporate communications and branding. Sumitomo was one major zaibatsu, Mitsui was another major zaibatsu, and in the shake-up after the bursting of the bubble economy, both of those were main banks, center of rival zaibatsu, then keiretsu groups, and so this cross-keiretsu unification of the banks was kind of humiliating for everybody involved, although it made a lot of sense from a banking point of view, from an efficiency point of view. And no one wanted their name to go second. So the compromise solution was Sumitomo got to go first in English because, oh, you're so global. And Mitsui got to go first in Japanese because, well, that's overwhelmingly the market. And actually, they historically lost enormous amounts of money overseas. And hobo tettashita, kind of returned to the Japanese market for compliance reasons and a whole bunch of things. So anyway, that's very chutahampa, as we would say in English. The polite but old-fashioned ways, betwixt and between. I think the more appropriate English expression, the more natural expression is to simply say it's seriously half-assed. So anyway, from the bank of half-assed, what do we see? They took over their Citibank business and Citi cards, and I had both of them. So I've directly experienced this as a customer. They rolled out a new brand identity for Citibank banking under Prestia. And Citi cards became Sumit Club is the short name for it, bit chutahampa. It's kind of okay. Their idea was that they were buying a premium customer base. Oops, let me go back. Now, buying a premium customer base, they thought generally, obviously not me, but Citibank customers were high net worth individuals. They wanted a premium banking experience. And so this is why they were going to move into this. So you're looking at high net worth individuals, premium banking experience. That's the rationale. Where do you hold the press conference to announce this great strategic acquisition? You do it in the storeroom. Okay. And what have we got in the back there? We've got a whole lot of crap that should have been thrown out years ago that no one felt authorized to do so. So we have a bunch of, what are they, 13-inch computer monitors? Hey, back in, well, before you guys were born, you know, that's real like 1993 kind of stuff, okay? When the first flat screen, the first panels started to emerge. Probably they didn't buy them then because it's so expensive. So they probably bought them around like 1998 or something like that. And no one had the guts to throw them out. And we see several unused fax machines. Who faxes these days, right? Okay. Unused fax machines stuck on the shelf there, which again, no one has the confidence to throw in the bin, and a whole bunch of documents. Actually, I can count 1, 2, 3. I think there's at least 4 dead fax machines stuck there in the background. Okay. Obviously, they don't collect the sordide gourmet around the headquarters there. And then a whole bunch of documents. It really doesn't instill confidence in the organization being at the cutting edge of technology, or the customer of the new ways of approaching the customer interface. Okay. So just kind of clumsy. Okay. And someone's just put a nice message here. The multimedia rooms in SILS building are the same monitors. Yeah. Touche, well spotted. Nice. Until a couple of years ago, actually, the OS on the computers and classrooms are just excruciatingly bad. I've been forever taking my Apple devices down. Now, here's a quick look at Room Rater, and you can see some of the ratings here. Okay, just to show them. We're looking down in the bottom left-hand corner. Hostage video with a glimpse of an escape route, because there's a door open in the side, okay? So you might be able to escape. Right. Please don't fuck things up. 2 out of 10 for the table, okay? And Rahm Emanuel, very famous, very interesting character. He was formerly the chief of staff for President Obama, and he was then mayor of Chicago. He's got a brand new book out. Excuse me a second. Didn't intend this, but just remembered it. Damn good book. Okay. The Nation City, Why Mayors Are Now Running the World. Okay. If you take my enterprise and governance course, or when we talk about place branding, is very relevant. So Rahm Emanuel, savvy guy, decent looking house. But he does look happier. He's absolutely famous for F-bombing the world at large. And he's just a real hard ass in a very interesting way. And by the way, his brother is one of the most influential kind of talent scouts and producers in the United States. And if anyone knows the TV series now finished on HBO, you can find it on Prime, Entourage, and the character Ari Gold. Ari Gold is a very thinly disguised, very thinly fictionalized version of Rahm Emanuel's brother. Anyway, so Rahm Emanuel's got a lot of savvy, but he's kind of done the lazy thing here, and he's just opened up his laptop and he's just kind of dialed in. So rule number 1, of course, is if you're doing any kind of Zoom meeting, particularly job interviews, internship interviews, and whatnot, elevate your camera, okay? So grab a pile of books, dumbboarded them week, and one of the standard kind of Amazon boxes that are about this size, if necessary. Don't jump on it, don't squash it. Just put it on top of your desk and put your computer up. Now, one of the reasons why, of course, you want to do this is you just avoid the problem of looking up your nose, okay, which is never really nice. So that tends to really mess with the angles. You can see it also throws out the verticals. Anyone who's played with photography knows this, that wide angle lenses generally are a problem. All zoom, all built-in cameras, what am I, I've got a complete mental block, webcams, all webcams are very wide angle, okay? And the reason why they're wide angle, twofold. It's very easy to make sure that you're in the frame, quite literally with the wide angle, but also they have a relatively deep, what we call depth of field, okay? And the cheap ones, they're not auto-focusing. The one I've got here is auto-focusing, and I can kind of trick it. I can move in and move out. I can make you kind of seasick. This is more expensive Logi one. Most of them have no autofocus. So the way they deal with that is to have a very wide depth of field, so very wide lens, and so considerable depth of field. The reverse of this, if you're using a telephoto lens, is what we call the bokeh effect, you know, where it's from Japanese, but you call it in English as well, bokeh. So you get a beautiful soft blurring. If you're using the portrait mode on your iPhone, it fakes bokeh. It's not real bokeh because it's actually wide angle lens, but it's using software to do this. Anyway, Rahm Emanuel's been a little bit lazy here. He should have kind of elevated his camera and gotten a little bit closer to it, so we can find some tips here. Okay. And one of the interesting things this guy constantly picks up with Room Rater is how people just use books as ornamentation. Okay. They don't really read the books. They only just have them to try and make themselves look nice. In this particular case, he obviously doesn't like her for very significant political reasons, and there was a scandal around her and all the rest of it. So she's got -3 out of 10. But he also says we're deducting 3 points for color coding books. One of the really sobering things which depresses retiring professors is they find that the largest market now for secondhand books is actually just for interior decoration, not actually for the books. And so books are actually bought by the meter in the US and some other markets, where they literally will stack them up and take them by the meter and will sort them by color. And if you want to see an example of this, the Sonia Rikyo flagship store in Tokyo, in Aoyama, has done this. And strange one, one's actually from Australia, Bill's in Shibuya, famous for its fluffy pancakes, originally from Sydney. I was sitting there in a nice corner lined with books, and I went to pull one of the books off and read it because they're taking forever to bring my order. And the staff rushed over and told me that I wasn't to touch the books, that they were kazari dake. When you tell that to a professor, it's just an utter insult. Okay. And, you know, sometimes Rate My Room gets kind of bitchy. Okay. But I had to pick this one because I thought it was a very kind of a funny comment. Okay. Declutter is not a city in India, okay, as opposed to Calcutta. That is just far too much. And if you even had to have that background, then at very least you should be wearing a plain shirt, okay? That really does your head in, okay? So a whole lot of accidental things. This is in a very premium hotel in Jerusalem, okay? The bathrooms are downstairs. Obviously, so is the business center. But anyone who knows their English knows that if you're going about the business, or there's business has lots of associations, and so this is very apt to be misunderstood. Okay. Here's one, just incredibly lazy graphic design. It's tuna chunks in brine, and someone has used a bit of clip art. Clearly the selling point, the whole selling point for this is that they're pole and line caught. They're not net caught, so they're much more environmentally sustainable. One of the really big issues with fishing is long drag net fishing, which captures everything. So you might be after the tuna, but any other fish, anything that gets in the way, byproduct, typically by the time they pull the nets up, all the other things are dead and they're just thrown over the side of the ship. It's incredibly wasteful. So more environmentally sustainable is line caught, although that's on a mass scale as well. Pole and line. This is the very traditional, the kind of ippon suri kind of way. So literally you have a powerful bit of wire, strong wire and strong flex, and a pole, and a very powerful fisher person, generally a fisherman, generally male, not necessarily. And they hook them and they throw them over the shoulder. It's quite a remarkable thing to see. Okay. And, you know, or in either or, you know, these fish, you know, 100, 200 kind of kilos. But what do we see? A lazy person has taken a picture of a tuna and has taken a picture of a fly fisherman. Now, fly fishermen catch trout that are normally about like that long, okay, with a tiny little hand-tied fly with little feathers and whatnot. And of course, you look at the slack in the line as well too. It's just extraordinarily lazy, okay? Okay, next thing is don't use what you don't understand. We see a lot of that in Japan. I just could not enjoy my lunch at this place. This is in Yurakucho, Marui, okay? It's the classic kind of, you know, found item used for interior decoration. Clearly, whoever bought this thought, bread, yeah, bread, food. And then they saw dressing and they thought dressing. Now they should have gone, hang on. Dressing in a container that big? What is a soiled dressing? Now these are from hospitals. A soiled dressing is a used bandage, 包帯とかね、利用されてる包帯。So this has got like blood and pus on it. This is like serious biohazard, okay? The kind of stuff which, of course, in modern days, we all use single use and they immediately go into closed hygienic containers and are sent for industrial incineration. Okay, once upon a time, and this is one reason why so many people went into hospital and then died because they went into hospital, they would reuse bandages because they would take them out and they'd boil them down and try and disinfect them and all the rest of it. Okay, so any native speaker takes one look at that. Unfortunately, I ordered the cut the steaky salada. So I had this rather rare beef steak, and then I looked, you know, it was nice and juicy. People think it's blood, but it's not. It's red, but it's not actually blood. Looked up and thought, oh, lovely soiled dressing. I feel like I'm in the Crimean War having my lunch while doctors are sawing off someone's, you know, leg, you know, watched by Florence Nightingale, with the only painkiller is a swig of a bottle of rum or something like that, which maybe not so bad. Now this brand you'll see around, it's I'm going to sound like I'm going to be a real bitch. This is a very suburban Japan brand, okay? Yeah, targeted young women walking around with shopping bags with titty written on them. It's just, lots of foreigners pull out their phones and snap this one because they're just so taken aback by it. And this one, what were they thinking? An effing sale, okay? Again, from a Japanese shopping mall. And yeah, they knew what they were doing because it's not just on the sign there, it's, you know, they've written it over there on the glass and everything, you know, effing sale, okay? Rightio, okay. Now, all brands are moving towards the use of social media. We completely understand that. And there's often a desire to get lots of followers. But if you get too creative, too carelessly, you completely lose control of it. Or you do clever things, but forget that a key feature of social media is that the very nature of the share, people are able to share it with their own commentary. So they co-create meaning. This is one of our key things, that you cannot control social media because you cannot control what people say, okay? Thank God. You know, that's the virtue of a liberal society. Qantas now, should I feel sorry for Qantas because they're not flying? No, because Qantas, quicker than any other airline, suddenly stopped all international flights as of the end of March last year, meaning that any Australian who's been trying to get back to their own country has been dependent on third country carriers. Anyway, a few years ago, Qantas decided to get all very clever, and they did a social media campaign, and they put it out there on Twitter, which said, to enter, tell us what is your dream luxury in-flight experience. Be creative. Answer must include, and even told people how to do it, hashtag Qantas luxury, okay? And the prize was that you could have a first-class flight if you were considered a winner. It was completely hijacked in a matter of hours. Australians, of course, like to, as we say in English, particularly in Australia, we say a lot, to take the piss out of something, to mock things, okay? By midday, at midday, they put it out, and they had a lot of bad press leading up to it. And well, it just didn't really work out. As we see down here, I just screenshot the report in the Sydney Morning Herald, which became widely shared itself. Okay, within an hour, the hashtag was trending across the country, but the tweets were not quite what management expected. Qantas luxury, when the passengers arrived before the couriers delivering the lockout notices do, that was lots of employees got stood down during an industrial dispute. Okay, getting from A to B without the plane being grounded or an engine catching fire. Okay. Qantas luxury is chartering a Greyhound bus and arriving at your destination days before your grounded Qantas flight. Okay. And a social media expert said that more than 51 tweets a minute on the hashtag within an hour. Most of them were making fun of the idea of Qantas luxury. Okay. So you just simply cannot control what people are going to do. So what you need to do when you're designing your communications is to have enormous disrespect for your own concept, okay? You really need to invite your own people, your friends, you need to do it yourself to really beat up on your own idea. And I'm going to talk briefly about lying, okay? Lying to professors and lying in general. First of all, coming to Japan, one of the things that kind of surprised me was very, very naive, is that how often organizations and often individuals in moments of panic just fibbed. That's the nice way of putting it, just lied. 平気で嘘を言う人も機関も会社も結構あるね。ごまかそうとする。Okay? In the Anglo-American world, even small lies massively damage your reputation. So it's always better to be really upfront. It's very difficult to recover from even a bit of dishonesty by exclusion. Okay, so that's a really important message. And some cultures are kind of more forgiving because it's often seen as, well, they kind of panicked and they didn't want to take responsibility, and I can understand that. The Anglo-American world, at least, is very, very tough in terms of taking personal responsibility. And it's fine. Well, it's not fine, but it's okay to screw up. It's how you deal with your mistakes and whether you be really open about your mistakes. So that's the critical thing. But what I want to say in particular is, if you are going to lie, if you are going to, for whatever reason, tell a mistruth, road test your own story. Okay, always have a story. Always have a story. Never be caught without a story. Okay. So I'm not saying lie. Just be ready with a story. Someone puts you on the spot. Don't be not being able to say anything. Yeah. Imagine what people are going to ask you and be ready. But test your own story. Interrogate yourself. Ask yourself 20 questions. Challenge your own story. Okay. And this is one of the crucial takeaways about communication. Know all the gaps, the flaws in your own narrative. Okay, other people will find them and they will fill them with negatives. And there's a lot of people out there who like to think negatively of other people and delight in finding, you say in English, the chinks in the armor, the gaps. Okay, so kind of foolproof your own narrative. Now I want to talk briefly here about a very, very distinctive example, which was never a good idea, and then even worse in its execution. One of the largest supermarket chains in Australia, in fact, it's it's almost an oligopolistic market. The other one is Coles. Audi from Germany is rapidly growing. They're doing very well as a third force, and then there's some other small players, but Coles are very, very powerful. And they've long had a catch copy of the fresh food people, and that has worked quite well for them, and they see them in so many different ways. The second one from the top here, over Woolworths, with the red and the green, that's something like 25, 30 years old. And they've continuously updated their brand image, even their logo. You know, if we see with the Woolworths has been changed to, it looks like it's kind of, I don't know, peeled grated asparagus, or maybe green apple skin, or whatever. So this is very much their positioning, and they've generally outperformed Coles in doing that quite well. Now, in Australia and New Zealand, we have this annual kind of War Memorial Day, 25th of April, Anzac Day. Anzac stands for Australian New Zealand Army Corps. Like so many memorial days in so many countries, it actually memorializes an utter military disaster. It was none other than a young Churchill, who at the time was Army Minister or Navy Minister, or one of them, in the British cabinet during World War I, came up with a clever idea that Allied forces would attack Turkey, Istanbul, and they would knock Turkey out of the war. And then they would be able to kind of sneak up on the Axis forces from behind, and they would be able to have supply to their allies, then the Russians and the Serbians and whatnot. So it kind of made sense, but it kind of failed in the details. And the initial invasion of a place called the Dardanelles in a narrow strip in the lead up to the Bosphorus Strait, up to Istanbul, it turned into an utter bloodbath. And lots of young soldiers, Australian, New Zealand, and British too, but the Australians and New Zealanders always forget about the British story. They always feel sorry for themselves and blame the British. Anyway, because it was a military disaster, what happened was these nationalistic journalists at the time wrote, yeah, disaster, but they were remarkably heroic. So Australia's War Memorial Day is linked to the day of that, so the 25th of April. And all subsequent wars, they have marked on this. And if you go to Australia, you can see there is a statue of the lone soldier all over the country, which are war memorials. So Woolworths bizarrely, stupidly decided to do something around social media with Anzac Day. Rule number one, on politically sensitive things, particularly something like War Memorial, you do not try and associate your brand with it. There are some things you just do not do. In Israel, there's a common expression, you don't Mickey Mouse the Holocaust. You just don't play with the Holocaust. You don't try and insert yourself in narratives about the Holocaust. And in so many countries, it's just brand death to try and leverage a national narrative, particularly around war loss and whatnot, for some kind of commercial advantage. So what they did was, they had this social media idea. They had this template that you could upload a picture of one of your ancestors who had served in the Australian military forces. And the idea was fresh in our memories. By the way, lest we forget, the every war memorial in every little town all over Australia has exactly the same thing written, lest we forget. Similarly in the UK and in New Zealand. So it's a very common message. Okay, so fresh in our memories, of course, was silly in the first place, because when people hear fresh in their memories, they think of like carrots and lettuce and whatnot, and now it's great granddad. So it was always a little bit tacky. But of course, someone very quickly put up a picture of Adolf Hitler, lest we forget, fresh in our memories, and that was what went massively viral. The person, of course, responsible for the campaign and the agency they outsourced it to, both lost their jobs. It was career devastating kind of moves. The ability of people to play with this, another Australian example, the Australian government of a somewhat right-wing persuasion decided to rebrand Australia's quarantine and customs service as Border Force, which generally was widely mocked. With the first announcement, this was before they even started the announcement. The live streaming before the minister even turned up, people were already riffing off it in social media with Border Force, and suddenly had stormtroopers there as well. Okay. Now, one of the great survivors in politics anywhere in the world, particularly in democracy, Benjamin, often called Bibi, Netanyahu, in Israel. Now, he is an absolute master of communications and targeting particular audiences. And I mean, he's just managed to survive 5 elections in a row that he frankly should have lost because he's facing corruption, trial, and a whole bunch of things. But he is just an astonishing political whiz, communications whiz. He's always been quite theatrical. He very famously, during the debate about sanctions against Iran, in relation to their nuclear program, he took this kind of stylized picture when he was speaking to the United Nations General Assembly, and he said, "This is a bomb," okay, and drew a line there. And very quickly, Israelis mocked this kind of mercilessly themselves, you know, complaining about every time you order a glass of wine, it's only half full. Every time you get a packet of chips, it's only 2/3 full. And then a whole bunch of other things like, we cannot let Iran acquire Christmas tree ornaments. If they get a photocopy, there'll be thousands of these by next week, blah, 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 blah. So it took a while to live that down. This is a lousy snap. But again, another shot at Qantas. I got onto a Qantas flight in the days when I could still get on. This was the last time I caught a Qantas flight. And I looked down, and a panel was kind of hanging off the side near my seat. And I thought, well, that doesn't inspire any confidence. God, the plane looks like it's falling apart. So given that you're going to fly in the air at 1,000 kilometers an hour, way up, even these tactile things, and I want to talk about this, the interfaces of organizations, which manifest in terms of the properties of the physical environment. You know, I walk into some Japanese banks, and I feel like I'm in Albania in 1985. You know, these grim walls, and you know, a scabby looking pot plant that, you know, doesn't have much time left on this earth, and bad furniture and all the rest of it. And you think, okay. It looks like the classic kind of death spiral where they don't have the money to rebuild, to redecorate. Well, this particular panel was falling off. I realized that it had actually been held in place with a bunch of stickers, and the stickers had torn and come away. And I looked more closely and realized that stickers were called integrity seals. Now, an integrity seal normally is to show that something has been unopened, and so therefore is hygienic. For example, it's secure. So they'll even put it across when they've tightened nuts and bolts and whatnot. And so in this particular case, clearly the panel was coming loose, and some guy had a bunch of integrity seals in his pocket, and he kind of stuck it off and stuck the thing back. You might as well use sticky tape, and the integrity seals were coming loose. So you don't have any integrity with that, okay? So one of the big messages, of course, is when you're trying to communicate with people, you know, tell someone who cares in a way they will care, kind of, you know, reaching out to people so that they connect in a meaningful kind of way. Here's another shot at Qantas. Now, this is the person who was responsible for the Qantas loyalty program. And as a frequent flyer member, I got this email. Now, you have to remember, are you talking to internal stakeholders? Are you going to the board of directors? Are you going to the analysts who make recommendations on the share price? Or are you talking to people who just want to get from A to B in a comfortable way on an airplane? And be very clear about what your target audience is in the message. So I'll just briefly read this. This is not to shareholders. I once was a shareholder, but I sold my shares. This was to frequent flyer program members. Today, Qantas announced its full financial results, blah, blah, blah. Right. I have received many questions in lead up today. Yeah, not from frequent flyers, I'm sure by the analysts, okay, and wanted to reach out to you. Don't say reach out. Reach out's like, oh, it's a bit me too-y. It's kind of bad. You know, with an update as a valued customer. I don't care if you guys lose money, just as long as you don't go bankrupt and I don't lose my frequent flyer points. In fact, the less money you make because you offer too nice a service and you don't cut back costs, the happier I am. So as long as you just make enough money to survive and are too generous to customers and your shareholders are unhappy, I am super happy, okay? But what does she tell me? Financial year results and transformation program. Right, today's financial year results are confronting, but they represent the year that is past. The group is addressing its major challenges and we've now come through the worst. Our transformation program is on track. Our overall financial performance is rapidly improving and subject to events outside our control. And we'll talk about this next week with compliance. When you hear someone say subject to events outside our control, they're saying we're already getting the excuses ready. Don't blame us if we don't do what we're going to say. The group is expecting to a return, check the English please, expecting to a return to an underlying PBT profit, okay? Most people are not accountants, so don't know what that means, in the first half of the current financial year. So the question is, why are you telling me this? I don't need to know this. And I want all of you to really think about your day-to-day experiences with any organization, you know, so over the next few weeks, and just how often do you find yourself being treated a little bit like an idiot by someone in an organization because you don't know that that's the wrong form, or you don't know that the faculty can't do this for you because this policy says this or that, you know, or whatever. Most of the time we're thinking, that's not my problem. あんたたちが勝手に決めたこと、あんたの都合に、なんで僕に、負担になるべきか。So this is first of all, what we call the problem of assumed knowledge, that the other party knows something. You assume because you know it, you assume they know it. But there's an even bigger problem to assume that because you care about something, because it matters internally, that your customers care about this. They don't care about this. They want a good product at a reasonable price. Everything else is your problem, okay? So be careful about understanding the customer's perspective, okay? And then, of course, the letter finishes off with the most vacuous, banal rubbish. Loyalty is a relationship business. As we say in English, no shit, Sherlock. What else would it be? Okay. Thank you. Loyalty is a relationship business. That's only someone who's got an MBA and lives in management speak world could actually think that that's a meaningful kind of statement. Okay. Now, you may be convinced, but other people may be horrified. I kind of suggest you don't Google this, okay? Killing Marius the giraffe. Let me have a swig of water. The story on Marius is an interesting one. This is at the Copenhagen Zoo. Now, Denmark has some of the strictest rules in the world about caring for animals, okay? Much more progressive than Japan. You know, see animals often in very bad state, tiny cages, and just not very well looked after. Unfortunately, in some cases, there's some very good practice in Japan, but there's some very bad practice as well too. Because Denmark takes animal welfare seriously, they killed Marius, and they killed Marius publicly. They invited people to come and watch Marius die and get chopped up, okay? Now you're thinking, what? How does that make sense? Well, I'll briefly explain how, from the point of view of the folks at Copenhagen Zoo, it made sense. One of the problems with animals in captivity and breeding is that it's a very limited gene pool. And there's only a few tens of thousands of giraffes. I think there's something like 80,000 giraffes or something in the world as a whole. And there is this worry that if you have giraffes just breeding amongst themselves, then you've got selection problems, and you're diminishing the gene pool. So they try to move, in many countries, they move the animals around. Copenhagen Zoo ended up with too many giraffes. And here's where the welfare concern kicked in. Giraffes, long necks, very difficult to put on aeroplanes, and ships take a long time. So there was this judgment that it would be, and I know this is strange, inhumane. Now remember, inhumane means not human. So you have to say, okay, treating it in a way human want to be treated. It would be cruel to a giraffe to ship them over a distance. So what are you going to do with Marius? Because they had too many giraffes. Some wealthy people in the United States offered to take Marius to the US to pay all the costs and love and nurture Marius. Anyway, they decided not to do that for welfare reasons. So then they thought, well, we're going to have to kill Marius. Okay, right. You can see the jump of logic, but anyway, we're going to have to kill Marius. Well, if we're going to kill Marius, this is an opportunity to show children the reality of the wild. And so they decided to kill Marius and invite people to watch the dissection of Marius. They're going to cut up the giraffe, and then they fed Marius to the lions. Okay. Now, the first problem was, of course, you can't just walk up and stab a giraffe. So how are you going to do this in a non-cruel kind of way? And this is where you get trapped in your own ethical concerns. So they blasted Marius in the head with a shotgun. And then they cut him up in front of the kids, okay, to show the realities of nature, okay. If they want to show the realities of nature, they just could have put Marius in the lion pen. That would have really brought a crowd, obviously quite horrified. So what's the takeaway? Often logical constructs, we get trapped in them, and no amount of trying to explain that logical construct to a broader audience will overcome the basic revulsion of the audience to this logical conclusion that has been drawn from that from that construct. And unfortunately, political processes have delivered this so many times. Some of the truly awful things, the expulsions of populations, indeed one can even argue the enormous crime of the Holocaust in World War II, came about because people were stuck in a story about racial purity and a nation state and citizenship grounded on ethne and whatnot, and led to previously unthinkable actions. Particularly if people find themselves under some kind of perceived threat. And one of the sobering things with COVID, with the pandemic, of course, is how countries, including my own, have closed their borders and have been quite cold to the disaffected, the disadvantaged. So, you know, the medical logic has kind of dictated this, and therefore decisions that were previously unthinkable become kind of acceptable. So I think that's one of the conclusions from this. But the other one is another straightforward one. If you name it, you can't just kill it, okay? Now, yes, a giraffe in the wild, torn apart by lions, yep. Once you've called it Marius, once you've personified it, to then kind of hack it up publicly is inviting a lot of criticism, a real backlash. And one of the really striking things is the kind of the experts involved, subject to this very technical kind of logic, and they would argue it was a very strong ethical imperative as well, just were actually quite angry at being criticized. And it was very kind of gyakugire. It's like, don't you idiots get this? It's like, no, well, don't you get it? Okay. And so this is a very common thing, a defensiveness and ostensibly a frustration that other people don't get the logic. And again, think about this, you know, the frustration that you might have experienced in dealing with organizations. You know, if you've got some issue, you go to the SILS office, you often find that, very often it's because people have kind of mastered the logic of the organization they're in. And when someone doesn't seem to get it, they treat them like an idiot. Whereas actually from the other party's perspective, that logic is just, it's arbitrary, it's imposed. There's alternative logics as well. One hint on this though, is when you've got no choice, when you are being subject to a logic, do make sure you understand the logic. Because if you're going to argue against them to act in your own interests, you'll have to argue in their terms. To bring an alternative logic will it just won't go in. Okay, and I'm going to come back and talk about that in some particular examples in the course, but it's a common thing that common mistake that people make. So outdated assumptions about audiences. We see this all the time in Japan. The change room, of course, with the women's, in the women's toilets, okay, or the baby change room is the mother's room. And I had numerous experiences of this when I was carrying around my young son, looking to change him and thinking, well, I can't go in there. And so then having to go outside or on a park bench or something like that, change a kid, okay? Now, trigger warning, as you'd say in the United States, some of these are a bit rude. So this is a rude alert. Get ready. Some of these are rude. Some of them are cheap. Some of them are cheeky. Some of them may be pranks. Okay. But you've been warned. Okay. This is pretty clever. It's sold very well briefly. Okay. It was a kind of a special limited edition beer. Blonde beer category, very popular. It's a little bit sweeter. Very good drink. But serious beer lovers, men, they're a little bit kind of shy about drinking a blonde beer because they feel they should be drinking something very hopsy, very bitter. One of the most powerful findings in focus group research with men and beer is men say they like a bitter beer or a dry beer. Asahi Super Dry is the classic one of this. Men feel they need to say this, but in blind tasting tests, actually men prefer, generally, overwhelmingly, a sweeter beer, not so dry, not so hopsy. Okay, so it's this tension between what you really like or what you're drawn to and what you feel you should like is a key feature in the psychology of men, beer, and selling to them. And so then on top of that, you get this gag, trash blonde. You know you shouldn't. Trash blonde is bleach blonde, kind of what? Not so classy, okay, shall we say, okay? You know you shouldn't, but you kind of can't help yourself. Very typical male thing. This is even more shameless. This is an energy drink that's sold a squee, and in the UK, I'm not even going to read it out. You can see it, okay? Needless to say, 99% of people who bought this were young males out clubbing. Okay, this one was in the Shinkansen. Joyce the Shinkansen. Okay, I don't know. Maybe if you're selling sake to Osan, this works well, but I thought this was just a little bit, okay. Yopparatte kanojo wa yuki mitai da. Okay, tokechatta. So, Osan, please, okay. I guess it works, okay. Now, here's another one. These energy drink markets, they're always kind of outdo each other with sensationalism. Zone, digital, performance, energy. Okay, and you look at the illustration and all the rest of it. I'm not even going to go there, but sufficiently kind of nazo and cheeky for people to engage with. And that's exactly what they wanted. They want people to snap pictures of it in social media and share it with each other and say, hey, did you see this? And then, of course, this is just weird. Ideal for Valentine's, okay? There was a very lazy staff member working in Woolworths that day, okay? I think they probably had the strawberries there. This one, I think, was a disgruntled employee who was just leaving. Soup for, you can read it yourself. And this one over here, I'm not going to read it out, but it says for a special aunt. A-U-N-T, okay? On the second large word there, that is not a C, that is a, stylized A. So there are some fonts that should not be used for some words, okay? Needless to say, a lot of people bought this as a joke for their mates, okay? Now, this was particularly strange for me. I saw this in the window of a wine shop in Rome and was astounded. This is Fascist wine collection. Okay, now in Germany you can't even sell these. But this really strange thing for me was I was looking at this and I thought, whoa, geez. And then I heard next to me, yabe, maji yabe, kore, ureru ka, Tottenham sige, maji yabe, kore. I looked down expecting to see a Japanese guy, and I saw an African dude speaking like maji yabe. And I said, こんな日本語でこんなマジやべって言ってるのやばくね? And then his wife started laughing. And it turned out that he was a long-term Japan resident with his Japanese wife traveling in Rome and had a similar reaction to myself. Probably it's very cheap wine for the local neo-fascist club selling rubbish, okay? So there's always going to be some kind of people who, as the former Australian Prime Minister famously said yesterday, in discussion to News Limited and Fox Limited, there is a market for crazy. There is a market for cheap. There is a market for vicious and nasty. Okay, so right now I want to. This is all about kind of sharing here now. Let me go to a brief discussion of things that work. A few found examples. Some of these leverage historical practice. Okay, often very DIY, and this is a really important thing, that good communications is not necessarily expensive. People just come up with really interesting ways to engage people's attention. Sometimes they're very tezukuri, okay, but they can be effective. Japan offers some interesting examples. You know, the color coding of subway lines and whatnot. It's long been the case on maps. We'll see what critical thing when we talk about spatiality of communications, that more and more there is this idea of designing the entire experience, customer experience, or as we say, customer journey through a certain space, and to coordinate that with the communication designs in two-dimensional space. So a really simple thing to do, for example, is just to simply start painting the pillars and whatnot, the colors of the color-coded subway lines. This is actually Wayne on this one, but you can see this in various places. This is now an international symbol, very effective. If ever you see a red triangle on a yellow line, stop, stand still, certainly do not advance beyond the sign, okay? This is widely recognized internationally. This is on the Golan Heights, on the border of area of Israel and Syria, okay? And there are lots of mines there that are left from the Six-Day War, and some of them from the Yom Kippur War. And by the way, I was up there on a beautiful spring day, and I could hear lots of explosions, and then some couple of Israeli officers came by and had a chat. I said, "Oh, are you guys practicing?" And they said, "No, that's the Syrian government bombarding rebel positions just over there." So it's very sobering to sit on a hill and have birds tweeting around you while just over there, a couple of kilometers away, people trying to kill each other. Okay, one of the tragedies of unresolved conflicts. This is in Italy. Hang on, I'm sorry. I sound like a horrible snob. No, it's in Greece. Okay, where am I? Oh, tell me. Oh, no, anyway, I can't go to either of them anyway. But a glassware store. And this is just such a clever thing to do. I walked about 200 meters down the street just to check this out. They just lit up the back of the store. This was after the store was closed at night, and it was just absolutely gorgeous. And so many people were stopping to do this. So a very simple, very clever effect. Sometimes the not updated, you know, that's just been there for decades and decades and decades, ages so gracefully that it becomes so nice that actually a lot of people would fake this. Now, this is genuine kind of, you know, antique grog shop in Italy, but the character was, of course, deeply endearing. Okay. Here's a clever campaign, a kind of a no fakes campaign that's being done in Venice. Okay. And the reason why it's done like this is a common way to sell fake products is particularly for a bunch of guys who don't have visas, unfortunately. They often spread out the fake, some of you will have seen this traveling, the fake handbags and whatnot. They have them on a cloth with cord tied in the corners, and when the police come along, they can very quickly pull the cord and gather up all their product and dash away. So there's kind of playing with this. So fakes kill your style, as if it's been the aftermath of a shooting or something. So, and they put these in a whole range of places where people are actually trying to sell fakes. So quite a clever thing to do. Now, when we try and project authenticity, and we're going to talk further about this when we're with Adam Johns later on in the semester, very often just handwritten signs, which just simply talk about the local product and the local sources. So this is in Padua in Italy. You know, the flour is from nearby, the mozzarella is nearby, and up the road from the tomato is from the Po Delta. Okay. So a very simple appeal, precisely because it's handwritten, has a degree of authenticity. A really clever thing done back in my home city, Brisbane in Australia, by none other than Yayoi Kusama. She was asked to do a art installation in front of the new Supreme Court building. And one of the striking things with the court, of course, was she went to the site and she saw that, and saw some of the media standing around because there is a bit of a media spectacle. And then this interesting question about like, who watches the watchers? And so her art intervention was to put a whole bunch of stylized eyeballs outside the court building. And apparently a bunch of the judges absolutely hate it. And to my mind, good. And we can see down there are some journalists, you know, kind of standing around there waiting. They're waiting to report yet again in a typically voyeuristic kind of way about crimes. Okay. We do see some very effective communications in the Japanese case, trying to encourage people subtly to do good things. Of course, as you can see, this is from the metro. So thank you for keeping it clean. It's a lot better than saying, don't be filthy, okay? Behave. It's like, thank you very much, you know. When you've already been thanked for behaving well, it's rather more difficult to turn around and behave badly, isn't it? Unfortunately, this very good practice in Japan is often not followed, okay? So you'll see around Waseda, you know, signs translated into English as, please cooperate. By the way, don't use that in English, and I'll come back to that later on. Clever little things to loft. Yurakucho loft. Koko kara skippity ippun ne. Okay, rather than 1 minute, skippity ippun. Miru shunkan in a nice mood. Of course, playing with commonly shared cultural reference points is a good way to go. Lady Kaga, okay. Blunt but effective, okay. No kebab. We see in the Italian case a lot of not authentic pizza places also doing kebabs, fish and chips, and a whole bunch of things. So actually by declaring, no, we're not doing kebabs, actually is a funny way of projecting your authenticity, okay? This is really blunt, but this is actually directed for Chinese customers, okay? Not made in China, so no China. It sounds like we don't want Chinese customers, but the very opposite. They're actually trying to reassure Chinese customers that they're not actually made in China, because people want to take the genuine products home. Now, I'm slightly mistimed my run here, timing-wise, my apologies, but I will, oh, probably about right. Just a couple of minutes here. Now I want to speak to briefly the video examples. Those of you who can join me in the classroom later on, I will go into this in a little bit little bit more detail, and then I'll follow up on the next week in the face-to-face session. I'm going to say something about that in a moment. Okay. Actually, no, I'll say this straight away. I just after we see how we go today, just with the moving from classroom to whatnot, down to the classroom, I will give you a very detailed schedule of when we're going to be starting our Zoom sessions each week, which ones are face-to-face, which weeks are online Zoom drop-in kind of sessions. I've got that all typed up, but I want to very tightly schedule. I just want to check how we go time-wise today. So you'll probably get that tonight. Okay, so let me just throw this up here. Okay, so this relates to topics 3 and 4, and I hope you engage with those particular examples there. One of the really significant developments in the early 1990s was to invite celebrity filmmakers, art house filmmakers, to collaborate, particularly for Lux brands. David Lynch, very much with a very much noir film tradition, did some very significant things for Armani. I put that particular screenshot there because from this I was asked numerous times if this was, looking at this, it doesn't look like me, but in the short advertisement, some people think it looks strikingly like a young version of me, and I happened to be overseas at the time. So people used to say, "Hey, were you in that Armani commercial?" No, that's not me. I wish it was. Okay. Some things work extraordinarily well at the time, but then become cliched over time. And the classic one is Obsession with Calvin Klein. And I'll speak further to this in a Zoom session next week. For those of you who just want to drop in, and down in the classroom, we'll have a look very specifically at this. I know a couple of people from Kyoto here. One of the most successful campaigns in recent decades in Japan is the Soda Kyoto Iko. Okay, extraordinarily successful because you can run it all seasons. It's got a recognizable jingle. You, in particular, can involve so many stakeholders in Kyoto, which is a critical thing when promoting a destination. But psychologically, it works so well for a very simple reason too. This, of course, is J.R. Tolkien. That one of Japan's great resources is this ability just to go and get on a train kind of kigaruni, impulsively. And Kyoto is not far away time-wise. It's 400, I'm not going to say the precise kilos. I think it's about 400 kilos, 380 or something. I'm not sure, might be wrong. But there's a train leaving every 15 minutes. You can, if you want to, on impulse, as long as you can afford to pay, you can just wander down to Tokyo Station and you can breeze down to Kyoto. So anyone who's got the financial means, literally, you can wake up Saturday morning, you can look at the weather report and say, oh, lovely, nice day. Ah, soda, Kyoto iko, kigaru ni ne. And it's kind of always there, and it's so different, and we hardly ever do it. But there's no reason why you can't do it, okay? And I'm endlessly advocating to people to look beyond Tokyo. Tokyo is one of the easiest great cities in the world to escape from because of the public transport infrastructure. I myself have a place in Niigata, and I just go back and forth. In fact, I was at I was working at my Niigata place yesterday, and about 9 p.m. last night, I thought, oh, just sorry, so I kind of like wandered, left my place after 9 p.m. last night, back in Tokyo in kind of no time. So we have this huge advantage. And you can look at the examples of how this is used. But sometimes you take something great, and then I don't know who did this, but took the government Cool Japan, which we'll talk about, and put Soda Kyoto Iko Cool Japan. I just cringed when I saw this. Why? Don't mess with what works. Okay. A wonderful example, and I remember a class member actually has a very close connection to the folks here. Seikado in Kyoto, I've got links to materials online. I've when it comes to my office. I've got some product in my office. They do some beautiful things, and they have been very successful in collaborating with designers in creating digital content to show the creation of the product, their artisanal spirit and whatnot. So I'd encourage you to engage with that. And they're across a range of platforms as well there. And a really good statement. I'm conscious of time, so I think I'll wrap it up here. A brand statement that really nails it, and they clearly got a native speaker to double check that it's not just right, it's a really good text, and I'll read it. In this day and age, the world is overflowing with things. Being surrounded by so much, we start to forget the importance and value of the truly special objects and indiscriminately want to eliminate everything, so not crazy minimalism. But in the background of these special things, there is hidden culture, tradition, art, technology, as well as the hearts of many people who've been involved. Not only do we take care to create products of high quality, we value those hidden aspects and do our best to convey them. It is a very persuasive narrative. It's manifest in the products, in the personalities. You go into the store in Kyoto and you can meet the current head of the business, and is a very persuasive individual as well too. I'll save this up for discussion in the coming class, and next week in the drop-in session we do it virtually. Really striking Australian case and why it makes sense. And I will also talk about this extraordinarily successful and a little bit kind of depressing for many young women to realize, really, this is what makes teenage boys and men in their early 20s buy deodorant? I'm afraid it is, but we'll talk about that. Okay, that's our time there. I'll move down to the classroom for those of you who are on campus. And if you're not, don't worry, you miss out. I'll cover those issues next week. So the Zoom session next week afterwards, I'm calling the like high school, we used to dread the stay back. We were forced to stay back, but this is a positive thing. We'll have a Zoom stay back. So on the program, it'll be in a ZSB, okay? We'll continue on for those people who want to join the discussion on a voluntary basis, and then there's lots of Q&A and whatnot as well too. When the groups are all, well, sorry, when all the enrollment is all finalized, I will go into more detail about the group project, but of course we'll be doing that in parallel with the Sophia folks as well too, so there's no hurry on that. The first thing you really need to get to thinking about, there's already plenty of resources on the website, is developing a skill set to create your own first YouTube video. Maybe it's not for some of you. Those of you it's not, you can astound me with your technical brilliance. So thanks, guys. Those of you on campus, I'll see you down there quite soon, okay? I'll zoom down probably within about 15 minutes. Okay, everyone else, thank you very much for joining me. I'll hang around for a few minutes if anyone's got any quick questions. Just be mindful, I'll be cutting it short down there, but that's okay. Certainly we'll kick off downstairs over in building 15 by 3, hopefully a bit earlier. So if you've got questions, I'll stay. Otherwise, take your leave and thank you very much.